Have you ever left something behind, but couldn't stop thinking about it? A relationship, a career, a mistake, a version of yourself you used to be. You walked away, you made the decision. You told everyone you were finally moving on. But some nights your mind still wanders back there, doesn't it? Sometimes the hardest thing to leave isn't a place. It's the emotional attachment we carry long after we've gone. There's an old story in the book of Genesis about a woman who almost escaped disaster. She got out. Her feet were already moving towards safety. And then she did one thing. She looked back. That single glance cost her everything. We're taught to see this as a warning about disobedience. But underneath the warning is something far more personal. Something almost uncomfortably familiar. Because most of us have looked back too, not at a burning city, but at a relationship we knew was unhealthy, at an old job that drained us, at a version of ourselves that we've technically outgrown but still secretly miss. This is the story of Lot's wife. But really, it's a story about why letting go is one of the hardest things a human being can do. Let's start with something psychology has known for a long time. The brain doesn't crave what is good for us. It craves what is familiar. Familiarity feels safe, even when it's painful. That's why people return to relationships that hurt them. That's why someone can hate their old life and still feel a strange pullback toward it. Our minds are wired to prefer the predictable over the unknown, even when the predictable is destructive. Walking into something new means walking into uncertainty. And uncertainty, to the human brain, often feels more dangerous than staying in pain we already understand. This is exactly what we see in the story of Lot's wife. God was rescuing her from a place of moral corruption and coming judgment. She wasn't being punished by leaving. She was being saved by leaving. But her body moved forward while her heart stayed behind. And that's the real lesson hiding inside this ancient story. You can physically walk away from something and still be emotionally tethered to it. You can change your environment and still carry the same internal attachment. Geography changes. The heart doesn't always follow. Think about how often this shows up in real life. Someone leaves a toxic relationship, but keeps checking that person's social media. Someone moves to a new city for a fresh start, but spends every evening replaying old memories. Someone walks away from an old identity, an old reputation, an old way of living, but quietly wonders if they made the right choice. This isn't weakness, it's human nature. Letting go isn't a single decision. It's a process the brain has to work through. There's a reason the Bible doesn't stop with one example of this struggle. After God freed the Israelites from slavery in Egypt, something strange happened. They began to long for the very place that had oppressed them. They missed the food. They missed the routine. They even said it would have been better to die in Egypt than to face the uncertainty of freedom. Read that again. They wanted to go back to slavery because at least slavery was familiar. This is the psychology of comfort zones. Pain that we know often feels safer than freedom we don't yet understand. Nostalgia plays a powerful trick on the human mind. It edits out the suffering and keeps only the comfort. The Israelites forgot the whips. They forgot the forced labor. They remembered only the meals. This is why people romanticize relationships that hurt them. This is why someone can miss a job that nearly broke them. Nostalgia rewrites memory to make the past look softer than it actually was. And the harder the present moment feels, the more convincing those rewritten memories become. This is exactly what was happening internally with Lot's wife. Sodom wasn't a peaceful place. It was a place of corruption and coming destruction. And yet, in the moment of leaving, something in her still reached backward. Maybe it was her home. Maybe it was relationships she didn't want to lose. Maybe it was simply the comfort of what she knew versus the uncertainty of what was ahead. We don't know the exact reason, but we understand the pull because most of us have felt it too. There's a deeper layer to this story that often gets overlooked. Identity. When you leave something behind, whether it's a relationship, a career, an old mindset, or an old version of yourself, you're not just losing a routine, you're losing a sense of who you were. Even if who you were wasn't healthy. Even if who you were was holding you back. The mind clings to identity because identity feels like security. Letting go of an old version of yourself can feel like losing a part of your own story, even when that part of your story was hurting you. This is why transformation is so difficult. It's not just about changing your circumstances. It's about grieving who you used to be. Centuries after Lot's wife, the Apostle Paul wrote something that speaks directly into this struggle. He said his goal was to forget what was behind him and press forward toward what was ahead. Paul wasn't saying the past didn't matter. He was acknowledging something deeply psychological. You cannot fully walk into your future while gripping tightly to your past. Jesus said something just as direct. He said that anyone who puts a hand to the plow and looks back isn't fit for what lies ahead. This wasn't about harsh judgment. It was about a basic truth of human focus. You cannot plow a straight line while constantly turning around. And you cannot build a new life while emotionally living in an old one. Even the story of the prodigal son reflects this same psychological pattern. After hitting rock bottom, the son didn't return to his former lifestyle of excess and self-destruction. He returned to his father. He returned to restoration. He didn't long for his old habits. He longed for healing. That's the difference between looking back out of unresolved attachment and looking back simply to acknowledge growth. One keeps you trapped. The other helps you understand how far you've come. So, what made Lot's wife's glance so dangerous? It wasn't curiosity. It was unfinished attachment. She wasn't just looking at a city. She was looking at everything she didn't want to release. Psychologically speaking, looking back becomes dangerous when it pulls us out of the present moment and back into emotional bondage. It's not the glance itself that destroys us. It's what the glance reveals about where our heart still lives. This is something many people experience without realizing it. You can sit in a new season of life, surrounded by new opportunities, and still feel emotionally stuck in an old one. You can be physically present in your new reality while mentally replaying your old one on a loop. This is the invisible battlefield so many people fight every single day, not the external move, but the internal release. So how do we actually let go? The first step is recognizing that healing isn't instant. It's not a single decision. It's a daily redirection of attention, away from what was and toward what could be. The second step is understanding that grief is part of growth. You're allowed to feel sadness over what you've left behind, even if leaving was the right decision. Grieving the past doesn't mean you regret your choice. It means you're human. The third step is recognizing that comfort and growth rarely exist in the same place at the same time. If something feels uncomfortable after you've made a positive change, that discomfort isn't always a sign you made the wrong decision. Sometimes it's simply the emotional cost of growth. And finally, healing begins the moment we stop living with one foot in yesterday and one foot in today. You cannot fully walk into the next chapter of your life while still glancing over your shoulder at the one before it. Lot's wife didn't become trapped because she walked too slowly. She became trapped because her heart refused to let go. And maybe that's the real question this story leaves us with. Not whether we've physically moved on, but whether our hearts have moved on with us. Sometimes the future we're being called toward begins the exact moment we finally stop looking back.